An elderly black woman faced humiliation inside a bustling bank. Fortunately, Jason Hart was nearby. Sometimes, stories unfold in the most mundane settings, on seemingly normal days, only to expose the rawest sides of humanity. That's exactly what occurred one late afternoon at the Riverside Trust Bank on Elm Street in Phoenix. The lobby was overcrowded, lines weaving all the way to the entrance. Frustrated customers shifted impatiently, glancing at their phones and whispering complaints. The atmosphere was thick with irritation, while employees hurried to keep up with the chaos. Behind the counter, a young teller named Brooke Simmons typed furiously on her computer, her face marked by exhaustion and barely concealed annoyance. Brooke had worked long enough to judge which customers were worth her time and which weren't. In her mind, the elderly woman standing before her didn't deserve much effort. Marcia Green, a 73-year-old retired librarian, clutched a crumpled envelope in her trembling hands. Proud and self-reliant all her life, Marcia had rarely asked for help. But today, she needed clarity. She had spotted strange deductions from her account, small amounts that made a big impact on her tight pension budget. Taking a steadying breath, she approached the counter and spoke politely. "Good afternoon," she said. "I think there's an error. In my account, I've been charged fees I wasn't told about." Brooke barely lifted her eyes, her fingers still tapping the keyboard. "Those are standard service fees, ma'am," she said, her tone cold. Marcia hesitated, holding out her receipt. "But I've had this account for years. I've never been charged like this before." Brooke let out a dramatic sigh, finally glancing up with a look of irritation. She snatched the papers from Marcia, skimmed them briefly, and shoved them back, without care. "It's all in the fine print. If you didn't read it, that's on you." Marcia blinked, stunned by the bluntness. Brooke exaggerated an eye roll, earning a few muted chuckles from the nearby line. Marcia's cheeks burned with embarrassment. "Listen," Brooke continued sharply, "if you want to avoid fees, you need to keep a higher balance. That's how banking works, ma'am." The public shaming had begun. Marcia's throat tightened. She wasn't looking for a fight, just fairness. After years of loyalty, this was how she was treated. Around her, the same people who had been loudly griping moments earlier now turned away, silent and detached. "I just want to understand." "What happened?" she said softly, still clinging to hope. At that moment, Marcus Daniels, the branch manager, walked over. He had been observing the scene, arms folded, deciding whether it was worth his attention. Marcus valued efficiency above all else, and to him, Marcia Green seemed a waste of it. He cleared his throat and addressed her with a thin smile. "Is there a problem here?" Marcus asked, his voice making it clear he didn't want a real answer. Brooke snapped to attention. "No, sir," she said briskly. "Just a customer who doesn't get our policies." Marcus turned to Marcia, his polite smile never quite touching his eyes. "Ma'am, we have standard rules. If you can't keep the minimum balance, there's nothing more we can offer." Marcia straightened her back, gathering the last shreds of her dignity. "I have always kept my account in good standing," she said, her voice steady. "These new fees just appeared out of nowhere. All I'm asking is for someone to take a look." Marcus let out a short, mocking laugh. "What's recorded in the system stays, ma'am. We don't re-examine automatic charges." Then came the final blow. Leaning slightly over the counter and loud enough for everyone to hear, Marcus added, "If you can't handle the fees, maybe you're banking in the wrong place." The lobby froze. Marcia swallowed the lump in her throat, clutching the envelope tighter. She had never felt so belittled. Then a deep, commanding voice pierced the silence. "Why are you speaking to her that way?" Every head in the building snapped toward the entrance. A man in a plain black t-shirt, jeans, and a cap stood there. At first glance, he looked like any regular visitor, but something about his stance, his tone, his very presence, made people instinctively take notice. Marcus turned, annoyance flickering across his face. "And who exactly are you to question how we run our business?" The man stepped forward, removing his cap slowly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. It was Dominic Chase. Yes, the Dominic Chase, famous for his roles in blockbuster action films. The man known for portraying courage and strength now stood at the center of a small but real battle. Marcus's confident facade faltered. "Mr. Chase, Dominic raised a hand, silencing him with a simple gesture. "Who I am doesn't matter," he said, his tone controlled, but firm. "What matters is why you're treating her this way." Marcia stared at Dominic, her heart pounding with disbelief. Marcus cleared his throat, trying to reclaim authority. "Sir, this doesn't concern you. We follow strict policies, and she failed to meet the criteria." Dominic's head tilted slightly, his eyes sharp. "Policies," he said slowly, "or just an excuse to embarrass someone who's asking for basic respect?" A few murmurs of agreement rose from the gathered crowd. Brooke, who earlier had acted so smug, now avoided eye contact, waiting for Marcus to somehow salvage the situation. Dominic turned to Marcia, his voice softening. "Ma'am, can you show me what's going on?" Marcia hesitated briefly, then handed him the envelope. Dominic flipped through the documents carefully. After a few moments, he looked back at Marcus, his face unreadable. "This is an error," Dominic said firmly. "These charges don't belong here. You're going to correct this." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but Dominic lifted his hand again, cutting him off. "If it's truly a mistake, you'll fix it, and if it's not—" His voice dropped a notch, full of quiet authority. "Then you'll have a far bigger problem on your hands." Marcus paled. Brooke fidgeted nervously behind the counter. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Marcus shifted his stance, glancing helplessly at Brooke, who offered no help. Dominic stood his ground, arms crossed, waiting in silence. For the first time that day, Marcus Daniels looked genuinely rattled. He had spent years brushing aside customers like Marcia Green, deeming them insignificant, but he had never counted on someone like Dominic Chase calling him out. Now every eye in the room was watching, and the balance of power had shifted. Dominic's voice remained steady, measured, and firm. "This isn't about company rules, it's about simple respect." He turned to Marcia, his features softening. "Ma'am, you mentioned these fees weren't there before?" Marcia nodded slowly, still trying to process the surreal moment. "I've had this account for over 3 decades, she said. "I've never seen these charges until 2 months ago." Dominic shifted his gaze back to Marcus, his eyebrow arching. 2 months ago, huh? So explain to me why her maintenance fees suddenly tripled." His voice remained calm, but there was an unmistakable tension underneath. Marcus's throat tightened. He let out a strained chuckle, desperate to reclaim control. "Mr. Chase, I don't think you fully grasp how banking operates. Fees change based on corporate policies. If a customer no longer qualifies for a premium account, extra charges apply. That's just how it works." Dominic nodded thoughtfully, pretending to mull it over. "I see. But tell me, Marcus, do you actually review those changes? Or do you just assume the system gets it right every time?" Marcus hesitated, sensing the trap. "There's a process in place to ensure accuracy," he answered carefully. Dominic exhaled sharply through his nose, an almost amused sound. "So you don't really check." He glanced down, flipping through Marcia's paperwork once more. "Here's what I'm seeing," Dominic continued. "A woman banking with you for over 30 years, suddenly blindsided by unexplained fees, then treated like she's the problem when she asks for answers." Marcus's face flushed deep red, his fingers drumming nervously against his arm. "We follow established guidelines," he muttered. "We can't make exceptions." Dominic's expression hardened. "That's where you're wrong," he said sharply. "You do make exceptions. You just don't make them for people like her." He didn't raise his voice, yet the entire room heard him clearly. Marcus felt the pressure mounting, the walls metaphorically closing in. Brooke, the young teller, cleared, her throat nervously. "Mr. Daniels, maybe we should—" Marcus shot her a look so sharp she immediately fell silent.
He was losing his grip, and everyone could see it. Dominic, meanwhile, was just warming up. He turned to address the entire room. "How many of you have had random fees show up on your accounts recently?" He held up Marcia's envelope like a
piece of evidence. At first, the room stayed silent. Then, slowly, hands began to rise. A man in work clothes, a young mother cradling a child, an older couple near the back. More hands followed. Marcus's stomach twisted into knots. This was no longer about one customer. Dominic scanned the crowd slowly, nodding with understanding. So, it's not just her. Interesting. He turned his attention back to Marcus. "You might want to choose your next words very carefully." Marcus swallowed hard, trapped. If he kept stonewalling Marcia, he'd be ignoring half the room. If he admitted wrongdoing, his career could be at stake. Dominic didn't wait. "Let's clear this up," he said, gesturing toward the nearest computer. "Since you're so confident in the system, why don't you pull up her account right now?" Marcus hesitated. Dominic tilted his head. "What's the matter? I thought you said it was all crystal clear for anyone paying attention." Brooke, her hands trembling slightly, moved toward the keyboard. Marcus shot her a glare, but she didn't dare meet his eyes. She had no choice. With hesitant fingers, she pulled up Marcia's account. The monitor lit up, numbers and details appearing clearly. Dominic leaned in, studying the screen carefully. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face. "Well, look at that," he said, tapping the screen gently. "The fees began 2 months ago, right after a shift in bank policy," Dominic said, his voice steady and sharp. "And it wasn't just her account." He turned back to the gathered customers. "How many of you have been banking here for more than 5 years?" Several hands rose quickly. Dominic's calm smile stayed in place. "And how many of you noticed new charges starting around that same time?" Even more hands shot up. The room was so quiet, you could hear someone shifting uneasily in the back. Dominic turned to Marcus again. "You see where this is going?" Marcus's face had gone pale. "Mr. Chase, I promise you, we don't target specific clients." Dominic lifted a hand, cutting him off. "You don't?" "That's strange, because from what I'm seeing, most of these new fees are hitting senior customers. The ones who might not catch them right away. The ones who might not have the strength to fight back." He let out a heavy sigh, shaking his head slowly. "That's not policy, Marcus. That's exploitation." Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again, his heartbeat roaring in his ears. Dominic stepped forward, his voice dropping lower. "I can't stand bullies, Marcus. Especially those who prey on the people who deserve our respect the most." He motioned toward Marcia. "This woman spent her life educating young minds. She helped build futures. And you're telling me she's not worthy of basic decency?" Sweat beaded on Marcus's forehead. He knew there was no spinning this. Customers were watching. Employees were watching. And even worse, someone near the front was holding up their phone, recording. Dominic caught the movement and chuckled softly. "Yeah, you see that? This is not staying inside these walls." He turned back to Marcus, his tone brooking no argument. "Here's what you're going to do. You're going to reverse every one of those charges, not just for Marcia, but for everyone here who's been wronged. And you're going to apologize, sincerely." Marcus's jaw tightened. He could see his whole career slipping away. Dominic stepped even closer, letting his next words hang heavy in the air. "And if you don't—" He paused, giving a slight shake of his head. "Well, I'd be very curious to see how your head office reacts when they find out their branch manager is making headlines for scamming senior citizens." Marcus sagged under the pressure, defeated. He turned toward Brooke. "Fix it," he muttered. Brooke didn't hesitate. Her fingers moved swiftly over the keyboard, reversing the charges one by one. A change began to ripple through the room. Nervous whispers faded into quiet approval. Dominic watched the screen, then turned back to Marcia, giving her a small, reassuring nod. "That's more like it," Dominic said, folding his arms across his chest. Marcus's face was the picture of defeat, but Dominic wasn't finished. "Now," he added, "let's hear that apology." Marcus clenched his jaw tight. He swallowed, struggling. "Ms. Green, I apologize for the misunderstanding." Dominic lifted an eyebrow, unimpressed. Marcus sighed heavily. "I apologize for the way you were treated. It was wrong and unacceptable." Marcia remained silent for a moment, then slowly gave a small nod. "Thank you," she said. Dominic glanced around the room, making sure everyone witnessed it. "See? That wasn't so hard," he said with a slight smile. Turning to the customers, he added, "Let this be a reminder. Speak up. Stand tall. Don't ever let anyone make you feel invisible." For the first time that afternoon, the air inside the bank changed. Gone was the tension, replaced with quiet admiration. And just like that, Dominic Chase slipped his cap back on, turned, and walked out the front doors. But the story was far from over. The video capturing it all was about to make waves. As Dominic disappeared into the street, the mood inside the bank shifted further. Customers who had earlier stayed silent now exchanged nods and whispers of approval. The employees behind the counters, including Brooke Simmons, stood frozen, still trying to process the whirlwind that had just blown through. Marcus Daniels, the once proud manager, remained rooted to the spot, his face drained of color, his fists clenched at his sides. He had lost control, and he knew it. Worse, he noticed the young man near the front of the line, still recording with his phone. Marcus's pulse thundered. He turned sharply to Brooke. "Shut that down! Now!" Brooke hesitated, glancing between Marcus and the computer screen where reversed fees were still listed. "Sir, Marcus growled, his patience crumbling. "Now!" But it was too late. The young man filming raised his voice. "Already uploaded, buddy. You can't erase it now." Marcus's heart sank. Just minutes ago, he had felt untouchable, dismissing Marcia Green as just another complaint he could brush aside. Now, his name, face, and actions were about to be plastered all over the internet. Marcia, standing quietly at the counter, watched the scene with a sense of growing satisfaction. For the first time since entering the bank, she didn't feel small. She had spent her career teaching students to stand up for what was right, and today someone unexpected had stepped in to remind her of that lesson. The young man holding the phone grinned. "This is gonna blow up. People love seeing justice served," he said. Marcus's pulse hammered in his ears. Snatching up his suit jacket, he turned sharply toward his office, intent on damage control. But before he could escape, Brooke spoke up, her voice shaky but firm. "Sir, I think we should report this." Marcus froze. Brooke continued. "We were never supposed to apply those fees. If corporate sees this—" Marcus spun around, his face turning an even deeper shade of red. "You really think corporate will side with some old woman over me?" he snapped bitterly, though the fear in his voice was clear. "I've run this branch for 8 years. The sharp ping of a notification cut him off. Then another, and another. Phones across the bank chimed as customers checked their screens. Confused, Marcia turned to the young man. He smirked. "Told you. It's already going viral." Marcus snatched his own phone, nearly dropping it when he saw the screen. The video was live. Hundreds of shares, dozens of comments, his name and his branch plastered across social media, captured in full, undeniable clarity. One word escaped his lips. No. The once quiet customers now murmured louder. Some chuckled, others nodded in grim satisfaction. Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the room. Some customers shook their heads at Marcus in open disgust. He could feel it, the shift in power, the way the tide had turned. Minutes ago, Marcia had been the one staring at the ground, ashamed. Now it was him. Suddenly the phone on the counter rang. Brooke glanced at the caller ID, her eyes widening. "It's corporate," she whispered. Marcus snatched the phone from her hand, straightening his tie and clearing his throat. He pressed the phone to his ear. "This is Marcus Daniels," he said, trying to sound composed. The voice on the other end was brisk and icy. "Mr. Daniels, we need to talk. Now." Without a word, Marcus spun on his heel, storming into his office and slamming the door behind him. Outside, the bank settled into a heavy silence. But it was a different kind of tension now. A quiet, expectant pause, like the calm after a storm when everyone is taking stock of the damage. Marcia let out a deep breath, suddenly realizing just how drained she felt. It was finally over. She glanced around and noticed many customers still holding their phones, still whispering about what had just unfolded. Brooke slowly approached, her stance less rigid than before. "Ms. Green, I want to apologize for how I treated you earlier," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Marcia studied her for a moment, then gave a quiet nod. "I appreciate that," she said. Brooke hesitated, then added more earnestly, "And I'm really sorry you had to fight so hard for something that should have been yours from the start." That, Marcia knew, was the real apology. The front doors swung open, and for a brief second, the entire room turned, as if half expecting Dominic Chase to return and finish what he had started. But it was just another customer, a tired mother juggling two restless children. Marcia smiled to herself. Dominic didn't need to come back. He had already done what was needed. A few days later, the full magnitude of that day's events hit. The video of the confrontation spread like wildfire. News outlets picked it up. Social media exploded. Within 24 hours, Riverside Trust Bank's headquarters issued a public statement announcing a formal review of the branch. By the end of the week, Marcus Daniels was officially removed from his position. The company cited a failure to uphold corporate values and a surge of customer complaints that surfaced after the video went viral. Brooke Simmons was placed under review but ultimately kept her job, after testifying that she had been pressured to follow unethical directives. Most importantly, every customer impacted by the hidden fees received full refunds. Marcia watched it all unfold from her living room, sipping tea and scrolling through the latest headlines. She never imagined a routine trip to the bank would turn into something so much bigger. As she read about Marcus's dismissal, she felt a quiet but powerful sense of victory. One morning, an envelope arrived at her door. It wasn't from the bank. The postmark read, Los Angeles, from a film studio. Inside was a handwritten note. "Ms. Green, you didn't need me to stand up for you. You already had the strength. You just needed a reminder. Hope this makes you smile. Dominic Chase." Tucked alongside the note was a signed movie poster and a personal invitation to one of Dominic's upcoming film premieres. Marcia laughed, shaking her head in amazement. She gently set the note down, running her fingers over the signature. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, valued, unstoppable. She stood up, stretched, and walked toward her front door, feeling lighter than she had in a long, long time. The world wasn't perfect, but now she knew. When you fight for what's right, sometimes the right people show up to stand beside you.